Welcome to episode 191 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Kav Sandhu from Blitz Vega about their debut album, Northern Gentlemen. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to legendary bassist and co-founder of both Joy Division and New Order, Peter Hook. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe on your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. Northern Gentlemen is the debut album by Blitz Vega, a band that Kav and the late Andy Rourke started in 2016 and officially launched in 2019. Andy Rourke succumbed to pancreatic cancer on May 19th, 2023. As Andy's posthumous album, Northern Gentlemen is a bittersweet celebration of the late bassist's impact on the music world and stands as a testament to the power and impact he continues to have. In this interview, Kav Sandhu talks about writing and recording the album with Andy, upcoming live shows, and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Kav Sandhu from Blitz Vega. Hi Kav, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Hi Mark, how's it going?
Very good. I always like to go back to the start with my guests. So, can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
Yeah, I mean, my aunt had gone away and she was traveling, and she'd left her vinyl collection, her record collection at my mum and dad's. And I grew up in Leicester, and in this area called Ayleston. Anyway, so my granddad used to pick me up from school, and every time I went home, I would just go through her record collection and start playing records. So I think the first thing I played was the first record I played was Sgt. Pepper, which completely blew my mind. And then I sort of was playing stuff like Sticky Fingers by the Stones, loads of Bob Dylan, Zeppelin, stuff like that. And I was about 6 or 7 at the time. So it was kind of just completely, I don't know, I was immediately drawn to music after that. I was anyway, watching stuff on TV, even like soundtracks. I think even stuff like, I suppose the opening credits to stuff like Dallas or whatever was on TV at the time. I was just immediately drawn to music. And after that, I would say when I was at school, Guns N' Roses were the first band that really sort of, I suppose, I discovered for myself in a way. There was a TV show on BBC Two, and it was like a live gig of them playing in New York, I think, at the Ritz. And I just remember seeing these characters, these rock and roll characters, and I was immediately drawn to the rhythm guitarist, Izzy Stradlin. And I just kind of like decided at that point, that's what I want to do. I want to do what he does. And then Nirvana, all the grunge stuff, Alice in Chains, stuff like that. And then Oasis came along, and that was the first sort of, I suppose, band that felt like your own band, because you related to them. They were from a similar town, or I don't know. There was something that just drew me into Oasis at that point, and they crossed over different, I suppose, groups of people. You had people who were into like rock or grunge, and then you had all the dance kids. But somehow Oasis managed to, and then I went back to the Stone Roses and stuff like that, the Smiths, I suppose, and the Happy Mondays as well, I guess, and bands like that, New Order, Joy Division, stuff like that. But Oasis were the main band at school.
Well, I have to ask, obviously, as we speak now, Oasis are the most topical band in the world at the moment. It's fantastic that they got back together. I was lucky enough to get tickets for Wembley. So how do you feel about the whole saga?
I think it's great. I think the impact a band like that had on, my generation and, I suppose kids who are growing up now as well, when you look at all the Liam Gallagher gigs and, the energy and the connection he has with the audience. I think they're always one of those bands that you're able to forget whatever was going on in your life outside of that club or, stadium or whatever it was, and they had this power of being able to just pull everyone together and, sing those huge choruses together. And, there's only a few bands, I guess, when you look throughout time, history, that have that power to cross all kind of, I suppose, groups and generations and stuff. I suppose, obviously you've got the greats from the 60s, 70s and 80s, but, I mean, I think it's great timing. I think, the world needs Oasis, bands like that.
And I think it's going to be really good for guitar bands and, kids in their garages starting bands, and then, current bands who from that era. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how much of an influence they had when they first came around, but I think that's the other thing. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I think kids picking up guitars, drums, trying to write songs. I think it will have a huge knock-on effect on the next generation of musicians, which is great. We want to see more live bands. You want to see real musicians. I think it's really important, for venues, for festivals, for just a knock-on impact. Culturally, it's important. So, yeah, I think it's going to be great.
Your band, Blitz Vega, will be releasing debut album Northern Gentleman in September. It's your collaboration album with the late Andy Rourke. So can you tell me, how did you meet Andy and what made you decide to work together? What was the initial spark that led the collaboration?
Well, I met Andy years ago. It would have been like 2001, something like that. I was a kid playing in my first band, first touring band, I guess, from my hometown in Leicester, and we were playing up in Manchester, and we played to an audience of like, some of our favourite bands. So you had people like Manny from Stone Roses, who actually brought Andy down to the gig, people like Bonehead from Oasis, and people like that, loads of Manchester bands. And so Andy came up to us after the gig, and he was just really, really nice and really sort of complimentary, and gave us that just enthusiasm to, keep doing what you're doing kind of thing. And, he was so humble. And I was immediately sort of, I suppose we really connected, we stayed in touch over the years. And then I was running some nights, club events in London. And he would come down and DJ with Mike Joyce. And then, forward a few years, and I'm playing Coachella Festival with the Happy Mondays, and Andy was DJing that same night. So we had a night, after the gig, and hung out. And he was like, "Look, if you ever want to do something, we should do something together." And so I was like, yeah, but, you have a lot of these conversations when you bump into people backstage or, wherever, or in a club or whatever. So I didn't really think anything of it. And then, both me and Andy were quite similar like this. The years go by, you'll have a thought and then suddenly 5 years have gone. But in 2016, Andy was coming over from New York. I was based in LA. And Andy was coming over to DJ at some nights I had on in downtown LA. And so he came over and we were hanging out. And I just asked him, "Oh, do you fancy coming down and laying some bass down on a track?" So he came over to the studio and laid some bass down on a track on the album, which is called Lost and Found, which was originally a track that I originally wrote for some solo stuff. And then, he really enjoyed that session. We were just buzzing off each other. It was just a great vibe in the studio. And then he just said, we should just start a band. So that was it. And then we continued to record for, we didn't have a name for about 6 months, and then we picked the name. But yeah, that's how it started. There was no planning, really.
Yeah, it's a great name. The first time I was aware of Blitz Vega was when you released your first single, Hey Christo, in 2019.
Yeah.
Great track.
Thank you. I mean, that was the first time we sort of really announced the band. We'd been recording together for a while, but we were sort of just enjoying being in the studio, and because Andy was obviously fighting his illness at the time, he he couldn't tour, so we were aware that we couldn't really play live until he was better. So then we sort of 2019 was the time when he was okay, and we were able to sort of announce the band, and sort of, we were planning on going on the road at that time, but again it sort of came back, so he was unable to do that. So then after that we kind of just locked ourselves in the studio, and then, as you know, everyone knows, COVID hit us pretty hard in 2020, and then we were, locked down again, and so yeah.
No, the album Northern Gentleman, it's an absolute banger. Did you go into the recording of the album with any preconceived ideas how it should sound and the kind of songs you wanted to write about?
No, not at all, and that was the beauty of it, and that's why, I'll say it was probably the most enjoyable recording. Well, it was definitely the most enjoyable recording process since I've ever been involved in music or writing songs and recording. We didn't discuss that. All that would happen would be, we're both huge Stones fans. We love to talk about the Stones or Neil Young, or and we kind of, when we were playing together, we had that natural kind of looseness that bands like the Stones have. It was kind of a bit sloppy, but kind of still worked, and still worked with the drums pulling back, and it wasn't planned, but that's something that we both really wanted to do naturally without really talking about it. So it has that feel to it. But again, we didn't plan for anything. We didn't really talk about it. We just went in the studio and recorded and came up with ideas, and the things that influenced me lyrically would be just everything that was in front of me. Anything that was going on. It could just be as simple as going to a bar and having a drink or something, and something influences you there, or you're driving. I remember countless times of just driving on the traffic in LA is obviously absolutely nuts. So you'd be spending a lot of time just sitting in the car, and so I'd have this little tiny Yamaha acoustic guitar in the passenger seat. So as you kind of like stuck in traffic on the 101 or whatever, I just kind of pull the guitar out if I had an idea, and switch my iPhone on and record it, and then send it to Andy, and then Andy would give me the thumbs up or thumbs down, and we'd sort of take it from there. But most of the stuff came up in the studio. I mean, I'm still discovering more stuff as I go through hard drives. I'm shocked at the amount of music we recorded, but it was a 7-year period, so there was a lot of music that I've even forgotten about. So,
what inspired the album title?
Andy. When I was talking to, it was actually after he passed. When I was talking to Andy about, when I was talking to my label partners, Gemma and Woody, about Andy, they didn't know him, and they were sort of like going, "Oh, so what was he like?" And I just said he was a Northern Gentleman, and they were like, "Well, you should call the album Northern Gentleman." So it just kind of fitted, and he was. So yeah, I just wanted to. The Blitz Vega album really is something that was so important to him, and something that he put everything into making in, the most difficult circumstances. But when he walked into that studio, he just completely switched off and had a massive smile on his face and loved playing bass. He used to just say to me, "All I want to do, Kav, is play bass." And couldn't be a truer word, really. Description of what he wanted to do. He just wanted to play bass, but he just had this amazing ability of making you feel really comfortable and happy. And he wouldn't even think about the fact that he had this thing hanging over him, because he would just, he could be having some kind of treatment or something in New York, and the next day he's on a flight and he's in the studio. Just an extremely incredible man, really, and someone I feel very lucky to have worked with, but known more than anything. So he was a gentleman, not a gentleman. So that's kind of it. That's the reason.
Well, sadly, Andy passed on May 19th, 2023. So what stage was the album in then?
It was done. It was completely recorded. We'd mixed it. I'd played him the final mixes about 3 or 4 weeks before he passed. So I was basically still in the studio changing lyrics and adding the odd guitar or whatever. And I was flying back and forth from the studio in LA to New York. And I would basically take some headphones into Sloan Kettering, which is where he was having treatment. And he would listen to the album and then give me his notes. So he had some mixed notes that we changed after he passed, because he, given me quite clear instructions on what he wanted. So I tried to, I mean, he passed on the 19th. I tried to get into. I was actually back in the UK, so I was due to go and fly to see him that Sunday after he passed. So I still had my flight. So I kind of I still went back to the States, flew over to LA, and then worked on his notes and finished the record. But it took a bit more time because you kind of think that if you throw yourself into it, and because it was his notes were fresh, I was just worried that even though I had them written down, that I'd forget. So I wanted to approach it as soon as possible, but it took a little bit longer. It probably took another 2 or 3 tries of going to the studio and actually being able to focus on the actual finishing of the record, the final parts. And that's kind of, so by about July it was complete.
Well, there's so many great songs on the album. Let's talk about them. The album kicks off with Disconnected, which showcases Andy's signature melodic bass lines and your vocals. What can you tell me about that? Why did it have to be the first track?
He chose it as the first track. It was Disconnected was a weird one because it went through about 4 or 5 different versions before we finally found. Well, the song was in there, but there was just so many different sort of. For instance, I would record loads of guitars, and there's too many guitars on there. There wasn't enough space, so we'd go back and try different things. And I mean, once we got the mix right, there was so many things going on in that song. Once we got the mix right, it came alive and it just felt right. It was just a really good feel sort of song to play together, and I remember it coming together really, really quickly as a song. And Andy just had this bass line and came to the studio with the bass line. And then I started playing the riff on it, the kind of main melodical riff that goes through. And he was just playing it and I was just playing this riff. And then suddenly the song came together and that was it. And then we recorded the drums pretty much straight away and then recorded all the parts. And it was done in a day. But yeah, there was a song that he wanted to open the album with. So.
And the song Strong Forever, which features Andy's bandmate from the Smiths, the legendary Johnny Marr, on guitar. What was it like seeing those two guys in the studio together, working together again on that track?
Yeah, I mean, so that happened in lockdown. So I didn't personally see it. And it was one of those situations where, it was really weird because Andy just calls me out of the blue and he just said, Johnny said he'll play on the single Strong Forever. I was like, oh, cool. And obviously it took me a minute and I was like, well, it's obviously talking about Johnny Marr. But so then Andy said, can you send the parts over? So I sent the parts over and I think within a few days we had Johnny Marr's parts. And then I just remember sitting in my studio here in Surrey and I was like sitting there and I just basically muted everything and just listened to Johnny's guitar and Andy's bass. And it was beautiful just to hear them two magical musicians, play together again. It was something really special. I mean, I know they did it live, but to hear it on record like that, and it was so. Johnny Marr sounded like Johnny Marr, and Andy Rourke sounded like Andy Rourke, and so it was a very special moment to just. It's obviously just to be on that track, is because I nearly wasn't on the track because although I'd wrote, the track with Andy, played guitar on it, but Tom Meehan from Kasabian was originally singing it. Yeah. But then, Andy was like, no, you need to sing it. So I ended up singing it. So.
But what I love, and I've heard before about Johnny Marr, he doesn't want to hear the song until he's in the studio, and then he puts his bits to it.
Oh wow! Oh cool! Oh amazing! Yeah, no, I mean, he must have just stuck the tune on and then basically, played whatever came naturally because it happened very quickly. And he sent us apart, sounding exactly how they should sound, and it was it was absolutely incredible. It's beautiful. I love listening to that guitar part, and it's. I don't think there's a guitarist like him on the planet, no matter how good they are. He's definitely unique as a guitarist. I think there was some footage somebody had played of him playing Champagne Supernova with Oasis. I think he's playing a Les Paul as well, Les Paul guitar, and sorry, I'm a bit of a guitar fanatic, but the different types of guitars sounding in different ways, and I think him just playing Champagne Supernova with more of a distorted lead rock kind of lead style. I mean, yeah, they're so rare that he did that, but it's just exceptional, absolutely incredible, and it just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, kind of playing. But obviously, yeah, I saw him play Isle of Wight Festival as well, just recently this summer, and yeah, I've seen him a few times now in LA as well, and yeah, just incredible artist, guitarist, songwriter. So and I love his singing as well. I remember Andy was always saying, "Yeah, I love the way Johnny sings the Smith songs." He used to talk about it quite a lot. So
I interviewed him a few years ago, and he came out with the line, "It's amazing what you could do with a piece of wood and 6 strings."
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's amazing.
My favorite song on the album is High Gravity. I love it when the synth part comes in at 2 minutes 40.
Yeah,
I just love it. I don't know why.
Oh, brilliant. Cool. No, you know what? It's probably one of my favorites. It's the most played track on the album for me. There was a funny day. We were driving to the studio, and this was before Andy's illness had really sort of took hold, and so he was still drinking beer at the time because he gave up alcohol and everything. We're driving to the studio, and we were just looking to grab some beers for the guys before the studio session, and we found an off license in this kind of pretty sketchy part of LA, and we go in and we're trying to find some beer, and you couldn't find anything that was recognizable to us anyway, and we end up getting some beers called High Gravity. So we go to the studio and just basically we had the song title there. It was like, oh, High Gravity, cool, and that was it. And then just wrote the song, and the music came together within an hour, and then the parts are just flying as you've got the melodies, the synth part, just everything is just, it was me, Andy, and the keyboard player in the studio with our co-producer Will Kennedy, and we were just in the studio and we were just bouncing off the wall, and the song came together pretty quickly, and then I did the vocals at a later date.
Yeah, it's a great track, and I just love that synth. Lost Myself, it's another favorite, and really it's about inspired by journeys of losing people and dealing with grief, which was quite apt for the album.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about the album. The thing is, you don't realize until you write, because you're not planning on writing these songs. So there's no oh, this is what we're going to do, or write a song about this. So everything comes as you feel it. And the weird thing is, I found about looking back at the album, there's a lot of getting lost and a lot of searching for something, whatever that is, within us. And without meaning to, that's just, I guess, where we were, or, maybe I'm still there. But the thing is, it kind of lost myself with something. We'd lost people around that time, both of us. And so the song came pretty quickly. I think we were rehearsing for the one full band gig we actually did, which was at House of Machines in LA. And I came to the rehearsals with the song, and we just started playing it. We played it at the gig, and it was a different version of what it ended up being. And then gradually we were working on it bit by bit. And then as Andy was unwell, February 2023, And as I'm flying back from New York after seeing him for the first time, and sort of seeing the difference in him just physically, I started writing the new lyrics, and then kind of just started noting down stuff of my experiences of just going back and forth from LA to New York and everything that was happening around that, and just what I was doing, generally. And and so that's how the verses came, but the actual chorus was done a couple of years before that.
What I want to know, and what the big question is, the song Big Nose, who's that about?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, actually. Big Nose is actually was my favorite to record because we were walking into the studio, and Andy basically sometimes would just say, "What have you got?" And that day I hadn't brought a song to the studio, so I was kind of like, shit, I've got to come up with something. So I sort of kind of planned the song in my head as I'm sort of walking into the studio, and he said, "What have you got?" And then I was, everyone's kind of looking at me. So I said to Craig, the drummer, "Right, Craig, just get in the live room and just follow me for the changes." And we kind of just played it and recorded it in 1 or 2 takes, just guitar and drums, and then we had the song. And then so lyrically, it just sat as an instrumental for maybe 6 to 10 months. But it's kind of, it would be wrong of me to say who it's about. It's probably not about anyone who would think it's about, but the song is, it's about, people in your life who choose to constantly bring you down, and want to go for the negative approach rather than kind of moving on and looking. I personally like to look at the good in people no matter what, and that's just something that Andy believed in as well. And some people like to focus on what's wrong with someone rather than what's right with them, and we all have issues, and we all have problems, and we all say the wrong things or make the wrong decisions at sometimes, and it's just basically somebody pushing you to the brink, going, right, enough's enough. Come on then, deal with it. I'll play it your way if you want me to. And that's Big Nose.
What song on the album reminds you most of Andy?
I would say LA Vampire, actually, because I just remember the day when he played that bass riff, and I just thought of, that's Andy Rourke. Just his bass playing was just, it's so melodical. It just drives the whole track. I mean, to be honest, his bass playing drives the whole album. But and there's other songs that I'm pulling up now, and I hear his bass, and stuff that hasn't been finished, and it's just incredible. But LA Vampire, for his bass line, on High Gravity he played guitar as well, so you'll hear that kind of little lead guitar bit that's being played on High Gravity. That's Andy on guitar. High Gravity reminds me of Andy at his most kind of joyful, in the fact that he there's a lot of taking the mick and a lot of jokes in the studio, and just fun, and just just being creative. And Lost and Found, sorry, I can't give you one song. I go off on one. There you go. I was thinking of all the songs, so that it'll probably take me an hour or two to answer that question. But for me, the song that genuinely makes me think of him more than anything is Lost Myself, because it's the hardest to play, and we've played 2 gigs recently, or in Edinburgh, and playing that song live takes me back to thinking about him. Not that I don't think of him on a daily basis, but it just takes me there, and just emotionally, it just sort of it takes a certain kind of focus to perform that how it should be performed, to respect Andy. Basically, it's not something you can just play and just fuck it. It's something that you have to get in the right zone for. So that song reminds me the most, and probably the lyrics being the last lyrics that I wrote on the album. So yeah, and his bass line again on the chorus, it's ridiculous. It's just his. When I listen to that bass line on the chorus, it's just I remember how that it just gives me that vocal melody so naturally. It was just so easy for me to write vocal melodies and write words or guitar parts when he had a bass line. Yeah.
And Blitz Vega have recently announced a show in Leicester at the International Music Venue on September the 20th. Will there be more shows throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how many shows we'll play this year, but the plan is for next year to play as many shows as we can. I promised Andy we'd take the band on the road, so we want to take the band on the road. But we'll play as many shows as people want us to play. If people want us to play a show, we'll play it. That's just where we are with it.
And I read that there was plans for a making of documentary. Is that still going to get put out? Is that still happening?
Yeah, it's definitely happening. It sort of it required me to go through a lot of the footage again recently, so it's like a gradual process. But we filmed pretty much everything over a 7-year period. So we'll be finishing that off probably at some point this year. And then hopefully we'll be able to release it by the end of next year, I should imagine, is the plan. So we just need to work out what we're doing, whether it's a film or it's like split into a few parts or something. But there's a lot of surprisingly kind of like really interesting stuff on there. And Andy really wanted it to go out there and show what I suppose the band and everything around it was kind of all about. So,
and you did mention, you said you have a lot of stuff unreleased. So, is there potential for further releases down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess there's always potential for that stuff. I guess right now is all I'm thinking about is we can get the album out and play a few shows. Then that's kind of, if we can get to that, great, and then we'll see if it's stuff that we think. I mean, there's some good songs on there. There's stuff that there were 17 songs up for the album that I liked and Andy liked, but Andy always wanted it to be a 10-song album, so maybe there'll be some remixes, or we'll give it to people to mix and do stuff with or whatever, and there'll be tracks being released over the next few years or whatever. But knowing me, it'll probably take 20 years, so we'll see at some point.
You mentioned Happy Mondays at the start, and you were in the band for a while. You co-wrote Playground Superstar with Sean Ryder, and you also co-wrote the 5th album, Uncle Dysfunctional. And what I found interesting, the very final track on Northern Gentleman is Pass the Gun, which it sounds like it would just come off Uncle Dysfunctional. It's very similar.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it was quite. Pass the Gun was actually the first proper track I'd ever wrote. So it's been through so many different changes. It was a song that came about when I was about 16 probably, something like that. We were in a house club. We were out at a house club called Emporium in Colville, in a village called Colville. And we used to have a rehearsal room. So me and my band, we went back to the rehearsal room with all our mates and had a bit of a party. And one of the DJs was playing that, scratching the Derek B sample. And so I pick up a guitar and write a song around it. And so that was the first time we sort of really, that song came about. And then over the years, the first person to mention it was Tommy, and from Kasabian would mention it all the time to me, and he would sing it back to me, backstage at Kasabian gigs or whatever, again and again and again. He was actually there at the original demoing of the song before Kasabian were even Kasabian. So, and Chris, the bassist, Chris Edwards, was also the engineer on the first recording of that song. So over the years, Tom would mention it again and again and again. And then Bonehead from Oasis had come over to LA, and he was guesting on guitar for me at the Viper Room. And so we were just driving, and he said, "Oh, you should record that song," and he starts talking about this song. And then when we started Blitz Vega, it was one of the first things that Andy said to me in the studio. He said, "Oh, we should really record that track." So, that's kind of what happened. And actually, there is a weird story here as well with Happy Mondays, is that when we were pulling all the songs together for the album, Sean Ryder did actually say, "Oh, we should do that song." So it's funny you mentioned that. So there's two songs from the past that were possibly going to be considered for the album. So we didn't in the end, but it was a song that Sean had brought up as well.
Interesting. Kav, I heard there was a time when you were thinking of quitting music, but decided against it following a chance meeting with Neil Young. What can you tell me about that?
I was it wasn't necessarily quitting music. I wasn't going to put my guitar down or anything, but I suppose I'd just been really just drained with the business side of the industry and just everything that goes with it, and how it was beginning to, it was always, not always about the music, but I think I was really it was taking over. I'd been in it for so long. It was a stormy day in LA, and at the time it hadn't rained much. So me and the missus, we get in my car, and we decided to drive to Malibu, which was about an hour away from where we lived. We just we were listening to Neil Young, the album that he'd recorded with Jack White, and he's talking on the album, and he's talking about the weather and stuff. We were listening to that, and we pull up at the beach, and before we got there, I'd said to Kate, my partner, I said, "Look, I'm just done with it," and she's like, "No, you're not. And I said, "No, I'm done with it. I just want to, drive a truck and take my guitar and, just get some peace or whatever." And then I said, "Well, unless there's a sign, unless there's a really strange sign, And so we drive to Malibu. We're listening to Neil Young. Pull up at this beach that we used to go to, and it was completely dead because you've got like the lightnings. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's like birds in the sky flying in all kinds of different kind of places, angles because of the storm and the rain's coming down. And it's just absolutely epic. And there's nobody there, and then suddenly this white Lincoln pulls up behind us, and I look in the rear view mirror, and it's Neil Young. It's Neil Young, and for me, Neil Young is like one of my greatest all-time artists. I love Neil Young and everything he's about, as well. So I kind of said to Kate, I was like, Neil Young's sitting behind us, and she was like, "What? No way." And anyway, she realizes it's him and his white Lincoln that's run on vegetable oil. And so anyway, she starts saying, "Oh, you need to go and say hello to him." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to go. I'm not just going to go up to Neil Young and knock on his, car window." So he ends up driving off down this sort of road along the beach, and she's like, "Oh, you've missed your chance of talking to Neil Young now." And I'm like, "Okay, screw it." And I knew it was a dead end, so I thought, just go, go and say hi. So I checked up, pulled up next to him, and I think I had like my LA Dodgers cap on. And so we pull up and wind the window down. And I'm like, "You're right, Neil," in my Leicester accent. And I don't think he expected that to pop out of my mouth. And he just starts laughing. So then he just walked right over and kind of landed in the car and started talking about the weather and music, and Kate was like, "Oh, Kav's thinking about giving up music and stuff." He's like, and then he just starts talking about why, just going, and we ended up talking to him for like, quite a while, and then it's like, "All right, Neil, cheers, mate, take care." Off we went, and that was it. And so, and I was like, "Yeah, I think I got my sign." So that was it, and that was just
big time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, weird. So, and then Blitz Vega was born a few months later. So, yeah.
Talk about putting things out to the universe. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It was weird. It was so weird. But yeah. Maybe I'll tell him one day. Hopefully, have a chance to say, you know what? It's not just your music that changed my life, but also this meeting. I remember he posted a picture that day on Facebook about the storm. So I remember there was a picture that was on, that he'd shot on like an 8mm. Yeah, he was, he was just really, just what a lovely man, and just so humble and so chilled, and just very, just someone really, it's great. Great to talk to Neil Young, briefly. So yeah, it was cool.
Amazing. That's amazing. Just a couple more questions, Kav.
Yeah.
I like to ask my guests the following questions.
Mm-hmm.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to your memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Yeah, there's an album called The Daddy of 'Em All by a band called Space Monkeys, Manchester band that was signed to Factory 2 Records. And
they're supporting you in the next gig?
Yeah. So Richard McMevian Duff is doing an acoustic set, and I supported him with one of my first bands at the Charlotte in Leicester when I was like 15, and this band just absolutely blew us away. Like everyone in our hometown who was into that type of music, they just became the soundtrack to our lives. And from the age of like, I suppose my sort of mid to late teens, every party, we went to any house party, that album would be on. Every DJ set I did, I would be playing their remixes. Every car journey, that album would be played from start to finish again and again and again. Going to a club, going to a night, playing gigs with our band, and just had it just holds sort of very fun memories for me in my teenage years, and just growing up in my hometown and hanging out with all my mates and just smiling, and they were they were a really special band, and so when this Leicester gig came up, and it's the first time 3 of us in Blitz Vega are from Leicester, so it's kind of like a hometown gig. So we just thought, got to see if Rich will be up for it, and he's just a really sound guy, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't really do it, but I'll do it. So yeah, excited about that.
I look forward to listening to it. Last one. If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
I'd love to play House of Machines with Andy again in LA, that gig. Yeah. I just love to be on stage with him again and play the Blitz Vega songs. And that gig was the most special gig I've ever played. So yeah, I'd love to do that again and again and again. So.
Well, Kav, Northern Gentlemen will be released on September the 27th this year. Is there anything else you would like to mention before we wrap up? Where can people buy it?
So yeah, the album will be out on the 27th of September on all the streaming services, and then we're releasing the vinyl version with a few different versions of songs in February 2025. So that'll be so you'll be able to get the full vinyl then as well. But for now, we're releasing the streaming version September. So you'll be hearing, we'll be boring people with a lot more, announcements of releases for the next few months. So.
Cool. Well, I'm absolutely loving it. It's a great album. Really, really fantastic.
Cheers, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you.